For the past 12 years, I have brought you conversations with great photographers. From legends to lesser-known photographers, it's always been my goal to introduce you to people who not only produce great work, but who are also inspirations. Over the past few months, as I've met many of you, you have shared how much the show has meant to you. I'm not only flattered by that, but it has encouraged me to produce more conversations for many years to come. Your financial support has also been invaluable. It has allowed us to create the free Candid Frame app and the new Alexa skill. It has also helped us to invest in microphones, recording devices, and software that's helped us to improve the sound quality of the show and improve the website. It's also helped us to travel, to meet photographers in person, to conduct interviews face-to-face, which provides a wonderful dynamic to our conversations. If you love what we're doing here and it's making a difference in your photographic life, I encourage you to donate today. You can support the work we do here by contributing as little as $2 a month to our Patreon campaign. That modest donation helps us to bring a quality show to you every week. Contribute today by visiting patreon.com/The Candid Frame. This is Ibarian X, and this is The Candid Frame. I've known Rick Sammon for years now, including serving as his editor when I worked for Outdoor Photographer and Digital Photo Pro magazines. I've always appreciated the enthusiasm and the passion that he brings to both photography and photo education. Whether it's through his books, magazine articles, and workshops, he has encouraged countless people to pursue their passion for photography. In his latest book, The Route 66 Photo Road Trip, he created a little something different. Along with his wife Susan, they produced a book that explores the richness of America's Route 66. The book provides valuable information for those who love combining a road trip with photography. Along with important information about planning a trip, food and restaurant recommendations, the book is also full of photographic tips for taking full advantage of the classic American adventure. Well, Rick, welcome to The Candid Frame. It's a pleasure to have my old friend back on the show.
Well, thank you so much. I don't know how long I've known you for, but I remember you were my great editor at PC Photo, which seems like 100 years ago.
Yeah, it does, man. It does. But I'm really excited to talk about your new book, The Route 66 Photo Road Trip. I'm in California, so it's been something that's been on my radar, but I never really thought about making the trip. But I was really spurred after going through the book. And what's interesting to me about this book, because you've written more books than I have, you've done a lot, but this one is being done with your wife. And
yes,
and I thought that a real good first question for you that a lot of photographers are always asking is like, how do you have a good photo trip with your spouse? What's the secret?
Well, I'll tell you, my secret for being married for 38 years is happy wife, happy life. Good
motto, yeah.
So this is a good motto. But what we do is, we basically, and we've been running our business since 1990, our photography business, the workshops and all this stuff. So it's a long time. And, what we do is we divide responsibilities. So in other words, in this book, we went into this knowing that I would basically write most of it and do the outline and things like that. And she would concentrate on photographing and writing about the restaurants and some of the places we stayed. So I think if you go into a project knowing, who's going to do what, it's going to avoid conflicts. Now, the only thing is, anyone who has ever worked with me will tell you that time moves faster for me than anyone else. No, it really does. I mean, I'm so impatient. So, I'm done the book before we even go.
Oh my God.
I'm exaggerating a little. But it is work. It is definitely a lot of work, but so I have a lot of pictures taken with my digital SLRs in there, and she has a lot of pictures taken with her iPhone, and she process these on site. I have to go back to the hotel and process them and things like that. So I think it's a good mix. It could show you that, and we don't identify who took which picture. We do have, as you saw, those sections in there, my photo tips and her photo tips. But, the old expression, which has been around forever, cameras don't take pictures, people do. So,
but what's your advice for people who are like, they have a photographer, but their spouse isn't a photographer, but the photographer is really inspired to take a trip because they want to make photographs. And there's always this sort of tension between them wanting to make photographs and the spouse wanting to get on and do something else. Right. So, you've been married a long time and you've met countless of photographers and photographic widows or widowers, because there are just as many women who are avid photographers as men these days. So what is your advice for people who want to take these trips with their significant others, but want to strike a balance between making photographs and then enjoying time with their loved one?
Well, I think you have to look at it like as a whole experience. Yes, we did go on Route 66 once to have fun just by ourselves, and the second time to really get more information for the book. So the first time we were just having fun. But my advice would be, think about that. You really do want to make it fun for the other person, because if the other person's not having fun, you're not going to have fun, and you're not going to get the best pictures, and you're not going to be able to write and do all this other stuff. So I would encourage, either a husband or a wife who has a spouse who is not that interested in photography, get them into iPhone photography. Get them. The first time we went, Susan took a couple of pictures. The second time we went, she took thousands of pictures and processed them on site. So, and then we would share that. So we really we made it more of like a travel log. This is not really a how-to photo book. It has some photo tips in there, but what we're doing is we're experiencing it together. And I think the experience and the fun we had comes through because although we take ourselves seriously, we take our work seriously, we don't take ourselves seriously. We have fun. One
of the things I found that helps me is that my wife is not an early riser. So I can get out. If I get up early enough, I can leave the hotel or wherever we're staying and go out where the light is good. And by the time I get back, she's just getting ready to go have breakfast and stuff like that. And you sort of use the middle of the day where the light is less than ideal to, we'll go around doing stuff. But I sort of schedule my time to dedicate to photography when the light's good. And
that's definitely a good tip. Yeah, and I did get up, like we went to the Wigwam. I went to the Wigwam Motel very early for sunrise. 2 mornings. I got up at like 5:30, and I got over there, and I got back when she was getting up. But most of the time, because she loves photography, Susan loves photography. She was out there with me.
Well, for people who are not from the States, because I got people who listen to the show from all over the world, why don't you explain what Route 66 was and is, and why you were inspired to go out and create images in this book?
Well, that's a good question because there is a what was and what is to Route 66. So at one time, it was a way to get across the country. So you had all these motels, you had all these shops, you had and these Art Deco hotels with these beautiful neon lights. These hotels were work of art. They're not like Holiday Inns, right? They all have these neon lights. On the cover of the book, we have the Blue Swallow Motel. It has a blue swallow on it. It's pink and blue and white, and it's really cool. So anyway, Route 66 was the way to go back and forth across the country. However, when I-40 opened, I think it was in the 60s, I-40 opened, it really killed Route 66 almost immediately. People stopped driving on Route 66, so the hotels closed. Many of the hotels closed. A lot of the shops closed. So as you're driving across I-40, there are these little brown signs that say, get off, here's historic Route 66, whether it's in Winslow or Gallup or all these towns in New Mexico. in Arizona, which is what we call the prime cut of Route 66. Mm-hmm. It actually starts in Chicago and goes to California. But anyway, you get off the super highway where people are going like 80 or 85 miles an hour, and you get off into these small towns, and you see these old cars, you see these old buildings, and you meet people who are trying to keep Route 66 alive, and a lot of dilapidated buildings. So it really is. You get off I-40 like today. You're in 2018. You get off there. You're back in you can be back in the 1960s if you have the right mindset.
Yeah, and that Route 66 is like embedded in our nation's history and culture. It was included in Grapes of Wrath from the whole migration of the Okies during the Dust Bowl. There was a TV show.
Yeah, where the guys drove around in a Corvette on Route 66. Although it was filmed in Canada, I think they were on Route 66. Yeah, yeah.
But it's really embedded in the sort of the imagination of the country, and I know people for decades, even after the highway came in, would make this wonderful trek out there, and it seems like you just described that it has so much potential subject matter to go and photograph. When's the best time to go out there?
Well, actually, you could go any time of year because it's in Arizona and New Mexico. We made one trip in the spring and one trip in the fall, but you could go in the winter time too. It's probably less crowded in the winter time, but it wasn't really crowded at all when we were there. But, the photo opportunities are just incredible. My wife and I have been to about 100 countries, and we still love going on Route 66. We're going to go back. There's just something. It's like going to like your favorite restaurant, right?
So how long is the stretch? Because as you said in the book, it's not a continuous highway anymore. So it's like there's like more of a sweet spot that you're recommending in the book. How long is that? And how long does it take to get from one end to the other?
Yeah, well, we did an 8-day trip. We landed in Albuquerque, and Albuquerque, New Mexico. Then we drove about 2 hours out to Tucumcari, which is where the iconic photograph on Route 66 is taken, the Blue Swallow Motel. So after we stayed overnight there, we drove up to Santa Fe. And you might think, Santa Fe on Route 66 all the way up from Albuquerque? Well, one of the governors wanted Route 66 to go through Santa Fe. So he changed the name of the roads. So we went up to Santa Fe, photographed these beautiful old churches that were built, when the Spanish were there. And then we went down to Gallup, and then we went to Holbrook and Winslow. You know the song Standing on the Corner of Winslow, Arizona?
Oh, okay.
That's not the name of the song, but it's in the song by the Eagles. And then we wound up in Vegas. So it's an 8-day trip. So what we do in the book is we cover like what we call, again, it's the prime cut. You could start in Chicago, and drive through cornfields for a couple of days. Right, but if you want great photos, we think the book really shows you where to go. And the Grand Canyon's a nice spot. It's not too far off of Route 66. It's maybe about an hour and a half or 2 hours. So that's a great spot to go to. Also, Route 66 on Route 66.
So when it comes to a road trip, I mean, I've done road trips, and not with the idea of making photographs, but one of the things that at least from a photographer's point of view, is there's some times that are just best to make photographs, and there are other times where it's just best to just drive and and get to wherever you need to go. But it seems like there's so many sort of opportunities to photograph along the route. How did you guys sort of figure out, how long do you stay in a particular spot? When do you get there? To take advantage of the best light and all those other things. How did you guys think about that when it came time to planning the trip?
Google. We Googled everything. And we have an app. We have Photo Pills, that app, and Photographers Ephemeris. That's the one we were using. So we actually knew exactly, because Route 66 runs east to west. We knew where the sun was going to rise. So we knew when we had to be in these different locations to get the best light. So we picked, actually, going from Albuquerque out to Las Vegas, we stopped at just about every place where there was a brown sign, where it says historic Route 66. And sometimes it's like a 2-hour drive between places, which gives you time to think. And sometimes it's like an hour. But that thinking time in between is a nice time to reflect on all the fun you had and how lucky you are to make a road trip, which, doesn't break the bank. Once you're there, you could get a flight on Southwest Airlines from, East Coast or West Coast to Albuquerque, discount ticket, rent a car and drive around. It doesn't cost that much. And it's a ton of fun.
Yeah. So, when sometimes, you get tempted to stay at a place a little longer. Were there any times where you felt like, well, let's stay here a little longer and sort of change things on the fly? Or did you guys adhere pretty much to your schedule?
Well, my friends call me the shoot and scoot photographer. So in other words, I go to a location, I get the shot, or we get the shots in this case, and then we scoot it out. Now, I will admit some of the shots are not, art quality, make a fine art print and put them on your wall, They're fun shots. We have shots of some of the restaurant owners. We're in the 66 Diner in Albuquerque, and the waitress is bringing over, in this like 1960s outfit, is bringing over these milkshakes and hamburgers and all this stuff. And they're fun shots.
Yeah.
So for what we were looking for was to really capture the fun and excitement, not be like Ansel Adams, waiting and planning out, for the light and to be there maybe for days.
So when it came to people, tell me about that, because, a lot of those people are there because they want to support the economy and, sustain the life of Route 66. Does that result in people being more amenable to being photographed, or are they sick and tired of so many people coming there with cameras that they kind of like, don't point a camera at me? What's it like? What was your experience?
I would say 100% positive. Now, you do know if you meet someone on Route 66, I know after doing this for so long, I kind of know if they don't want to be photographed. Like if I see a guy on a motorcycle and I go up and he's not looking that friendly, I'm not going to ask him to, hey, buddy, could I take your picture? But I did find motorcycle guys that were great and friendly. But what I do is I always promise to send a picture. My wife and I. And what I do, like if I want to photograph a young waitress in the 66 Diner who's in the book, right? What I say is my wife and I would love to, have a picture of you. Just not I would like to have a picture of you. So that two people, husband and wife team want to photograph someone makes it a little more acceptable, I think, to the person. And of course, I say it with a big smile. Yeah. I say, could you do us a favor and we'll send you the picture. And we always promise to send the picture. And just a small piece of advice, if you promise to send a picture to someone, if you don't do it, you're going to make it harder for me the next time I go to that place, or every photographer who's listening, right?
Yeah.
If you really have to do that. And it bugs me when I hear from someone, oh, the last person here said they do that, and I never got the picture. So I think being nice, being friendly. On Route 66, we didn't pay people for their pictures, but when I go to places like Myanmar, whatever, I do pay people. But we went to the neon sign. It's called a neon sign shop. It's called Absolutely Neon in Albuquerque. And the guy could not have been nicer. He let us come into his shop. I set up my camera because I wanted to get all the neon lights set up in the picture. They were blinking at different times. And I wanted to get him. I had to use HDR. So I asked him to stand still, and I took like 7 pictures, and it came out, and he was very patient. We met the angel of Route 66, the person to whom we dedicate the book to. He's actually founded the historic Route 66 Association, Angel del Gaudio. I think that's how he pronounces his last name. But anyway, he founded this. This is a great story, I think. We had met him on the previous trip a few years before. So we go into his shop, and I say to his daughter, I say, where's Angel? Oh, he's home sleeping. I said, man, I'm sorry I missed him. She calls him up. The guy's 92 years old, wakes up and rides his bicycle to see us on Route 66.
Wow.
I mean, 92. So that's why we dedicated the book to him, because he has such a love for Route 66. Again, he founded the Route 66 Association in New Mexico.
Yeah,
it's a ton of fun.
That's awesome. Because for me, it's a great trip is when I've had an opportunity to meet people. Right?
I think so.
It's not just about the pictures that I made or the interesting sights. If I had memories of people that I had a chance to meet, that for me means much more to me than anything else, because it really fleshes out the experience. And it seems like this route and this trip is really amenable to that.
Well, it is, and it's the same thing if the listeners are putting together like a slideshow. You could have a million pictures of hotels, and old cars and abandoned buildings. They're nice, but when you start to put some people pictures in there, including pictures of yourself, like I have pictures of Susan using her iPhone on the corner in Winslow, Arizona, it makes it come alive. It makes it more personal. So I really recommend doing that. For me, I think you know me since we worked together at PC Photo, which turned into, and Digital Photo's still around, right?
Yeah, Digital Photo Pro, outdoor photographers, it's still around.
Yeah, they're still around. I tell people my specialty is not specializing, but when it comes down to it, I love photographing people.
Yeah. So when you're traveling, as well as logistics, it's packing is like a big thing for me. I always wrestle with not trying to take too much because I have to haul that stuff for the airports. But when you're traveling out of a car, how do you what's best to do in terms of being able to pack just enough, especially since you have to accommodate all your camera equipment? What did you guys sort of figure out is sort of the sweet spot with respect to that?
Yeah, that's a good question, too, because and another reason to do any road trip, because you're self-contained. You don't have to worry about putting stuff in baggage or anything like that, losing a bag. So what we did is we put our suitcases in the back seat. And then, because who's going to steal a suitcase, right, I think. And what we did is then we put our cameras in my camera bags while we were driving around from location to location. Our camera's bag opened in the back seat. So if I saw something, I could just run around, pop the trunk, grab my camera, and shoot. So I wanted my cameras and my tripods hidden in the trunk, but I didn't want to look like a photographer, with with all the stuff in the back. And so I did take a lot of stuff.
Yeah, with respect to the equipment that you take, do you tend to take everything in the kitchen sink, or have you sort of come to the point where you sort of minimize how much you take?
People are surprised on my workshops how little stuff I take. Like I think on Route 66, on Route 66, I brought a fisheye lens, an 8 to 15 millimeter fisheye lens, my 16 to 35, my 24 to 105, and that was it. I knew I didn't need a telephoto lens. I might have missed some shots, but some wildlife shot, which you don't see too much wildlife on Route 66. So that was fine for them. And I brought 2 camera bodies. And then I have my laptop, and I have 2 accessory hard drives. So I'm backing my stuff up in 3 places. But all the valuable stuff is in the trunk.
Were you uploading any images to the cloud, just in case anything else happened?
I know I have to do that. But you know what? When we did go to dinner, I have these like safari pants and safari shorts with the big pockets. Mm-hmm. I always kept one hard drive with me all the time in case someone, broke into the hotel.
Yeah.
If I go to Africa, if I'm on safari, I'll have the stuff in the lodge. I'm going to have that hard drive with me. Even these thumb drives, you could put almost all the raw pictures from a Route 66 road trip on a couple of thumb drives. Don't even have to carry around a 500 gigabyte hard drive.
Yeah. There's 2 images of the same scene in the book, and I thought it was a really wonderful example of why you need to pay attention to good light. I didn't note the page, but it was a scene that you photographed right before sunset, and then you made the shot as the sun rose, and it completely transformed the scene. And I think that one of the things that a lot of people, including myself, forget when we're traveling is good light can make all the difference in the world. And sometimes it's really worth either sticking around getting up early or returning to a spot in order to leverage that. Talk about the importance of that in the work that you did for this book.
Yeah, we definitely do. I know which picture you're talking about. It was taken in outside of Tucumcari, New Mexico, where the Blue Swallow Motel is. And we were there, and the light wasn't that good. Mm-hmm. And again, like I said before, we're not looking for art quality pictures, but I knew I could do better. So I went back. Actually, Susan was sleeping. I went back early the next morning, and I got just that one picture. So I want to, almost all my books are how-to books, they're educational books. Mm-hmm. So I want to have as much education about photography in here as about traveling on Route 66. So I like doing the before and after examples. Same thing like when you're using Photoshop. I think that's a great way for people to learn how a simple adjustment like dehaze. We go out to the Oregon coast a lot, and it's hazy a lot. Dehaze in Photoshop and Lightroom is amazing if you don't overuse it. Right, otherwise you get that pixelated look or that grainy look.
Yeah, I tend to be a little conservative in terms of my adjustments.
I think that's wise. That's so wise. That's great advice.
I'll move the slider all the way and then come back, to just get a sense of what the effect is and sort of try to find my sweet spot. Yeah, but I think a lot of novice people take it a little bit too far just because they think it's cool, not knowing they're hurting everyone else's eyes.
Well, that's a good line too. Well, I was talking to someone and they said, well, we live in the slider generation. Yeah. I think when you and I started, we were working in the curves generation, curves in Photoshop, which is, the best way I found to one of the best ways I've found to control the exposure in a scene. And when you're doing that, you could also controlling the contrast and the saturation. So we lived in the curves and levels world, right? And now we live in the sliders world.
So when you're photographing on a trip, are you assessing what you're doing during the trip, or do you sort of wait until you get back home to start going through to the images and coloring them?
Well, on a trip like this, we knew what we needed. So we had basically an outline in our mind at least.
Okay.
We needed in each location, we needed a hotel, we needed people, we needed a church, we needed an old building, and we needed detailed information, because we don't want to say if you're looking at a building and the sun rises at the left and it rises at the right, you're going to get someone giving you a review on Amazon.com saying, they were looking in the wrong direction. So, accuracy, the expression, if you want to become an expert on something, write a book about it. It's funny, but it's true.
Yeah.
It's funny, but it's true. So yeah, we had an idea, but on a lot of our trips, you go to Africa and you just hope for the best because you just don't know what you're going to get.
In this case, you were intentionally creating photographs for illustrations in the book. But do you think having an idea of what kinds of images you want to get, like the equivalent of a shot list, is helpful to people when they're traveling to some place that they've not been to before or kind of unfamiliar with?
Absolutely. I review portfolios online. I'm sure you review portfolios at the end of your workshops or whatever. And sometimes someone came back from India and they had the most gorgeous headshots I've seen. They had 1,000 gorgeous headshots. They could have been taken, in little India, someplace else. They weren't environmental type portraits. So I really couldn't tell where they were taken. They didn't have any landscapes. They didn't have any, night scenes. They didn't have any inside low light scenes. They were all just portraits. So I think having a shot list, or at least thinking about the different type of shots that we can get, really helps us. And then just be open, if the weather's really bad, be open to that. If you want to get like up in Iceland, people go to Iceland to get beautiful pictures of the blue ice, in the glacial lagoon. But it may not be great weather, so you embrace that. And speaking of Iceland, there's a great expression. Have you been there?
No, not yet.
Well, for our listeners who have been there, for your listeners who have been there, they'll relate to this expression. If you think the weather's bad in Iceland, wait 10 minutes, it'll get worse. We were there. It was so windy. We went to a restaurant and the wind picked up and we couldn't get a cab because the cabs weren't going out because the doors would blow off.
Oh, my God.
It can be bad. It can be really windy.
Yeah. You know, you've traveled all over the place. As a photographer, as a workshop leader, as a writer, what would you say are some of the biggest mistakes you've ever made in terms of traveling?
Some of the biggest mistakes I made when traveling. Well, I was in Antarctica on a cruise ship on a Russian icebreaker about 10 years ago. Now, you've heard of viruses breaking out on cruise ships, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the key to not getting a virus is to wash your hands all the time and to use that disinfectant. And on this Russian cruise ship, they didn't have the disinfectant like when you went into the restaurant, went out of the restaurants, and things were served on a buffet line. So if one person has a virus on the ship, they're going to give it to everyone. Well, on this Russian icebreaker of 80 people, about 60 people, including myself, got the Norwalk virus, which is a fate worse than death, almost worse than death. I'm on the phone calling my wife, telling her where the will is. I thought I was going to die.
Oh, my God.
I really did. So not washing my hands, as simple as that sounds, sounds like, that was a big mistake. So if you go on a cruise ship, definitely, I was so sick, they locked us in our rooms. They didn't really lock us, but they quarantined us. They said, you can't go out of your rooms because they didn't want it to spread anywhere. So that was one mistake. Another mistake made very, very early on, this was about 20 years, we were in Varanasi in India. And we're with the guide. We're going around at night, and they had all these cremations going on along on the Ganges River. And it looked beautiful, and it is a beautiful thing, right? It's a nice ceremony. So I said to the guide, is it okay if I take a picture? So I raised my camera, and in about a second, about 15 or 20 guys were around me, and my wife yelling at us, saying we shouldn't take a picture. So that was a bad mistake. I don't really think I've made too many mistakes because I really try not to take chances. I was scuba diving. The first time I went scuba diving in Belize, I ran out of air at 130 feet.
Oh.
So if it had not been for this guy, Jim Rose, I definitely wouldn't be on your podcast. No, I mean, he came over, we buddy breathed to the surface. But I don't think I've made too many other big mistakes other than almost killing myself scuba diving.
So what's the essential bit of kit besides, obviously your cameras? It's essential whenever you travel, regardless where you go.
What else do I take?
What's essential for you? I mean, what's the one or two things that you feel like, if I go on a trip, I have to have this thing or this information, or what resource is invaluable to you?
Well, it's a combo. It's my iPhone and my headphones. Because I've been on so many planes with screaming babies, and there are just people talking. I get on the plane, I want to just be quiet. I want to go to sleep. So having those headphones is really, really important. And dressing comfortably on the plane, I think is, if you're going to be sleeping. We went from New York to Hong Kong last year. I think it was either 14 or 16 hours. So you want to dress comfortably for sure, because you don't want to be sleeping in that seat in uncomfortable pants or a starched shirt.
I went to South Africa last year, and the jet lag kicked my ass.
Yes.
So what's your remedy for jet lag?
Well, the remedy, basically, it does say, I appreciate and relate to, like, how many days did it take you to get over it? Like a week or more?
I was only there a week. So the entire week I was jet lagged the entire time.
I know. So what I do is I try to go, if I have if we're doing a workshop or if I'm going for an assignment, I'll get there like a day or two early so I can sleep. Especially if you're doing a workshop, you don't want to be falling asleep while you're talking about the the exposure triangle or whatever, which is, the aperture, the ISO, and the shutter speed. So I get there 2 or 3 days earlier. My wife, she doesn't drink at all. on the plane. So, and she just goes into the zone. It doesn't seem to affect her as much. I'll have a glass of wine every once in a while. But I used to take Ambien, which is a sleeping pill. But it's not really that good for you, and you can wake up in a fog. So right now, I take a Valium just to calm me down so I could fall asleep. And then I listen to music. But you have to give yourself some time, because I can relate 100% to what you're saying about how bad jet lag is. I find it worse when I'm coming home because I'm going someplace. I'm so excited. I get home. Okay, I got to download my images, all this other stuff, and get back to the usual stuff.
Your wife is a photographer like you, and she certainly has a different eye and a different approach to photography. What have you learned from spending time with her and photographing alongside her? Because I know that you teach a lot, but yep. I'm sure that she's sort of rubbed off on you in a variety of ways. In what ways are that? Well,
she's teaching iPhone classes now locally, and people are loving them. But I would say the main thing I learned from her is to put people in the pictures. I mean, we used to scuba dive for 20 years. That's all we did. And if someone would swim into the picture, I would you'd hear me curse through the regulator.
Really? Okay.
Right? But, so that I really learned that from her, how important it is. And if you're on Instagram, these people who have mega followings on Instagram, they'll have a picture, they'll have a beautiful scene, and the person in the picture might take up, 3% or 5% of the picture, and it's a stunning picture, right? So I think putting people in the pictures is really important. Ansel Adams, he had a thing called, people think he had a thing called, he only wanted to take pictures without an impression of the hand of man, whether it was a footprint or a telephone line. Well, it turns out that's not true, because he has beautiful pictures of the Golden Gate Bridge while it was being built, and he has some nice portraits in there too. So that whole thing about that he never took a picture, that with the hand of man in it is not true. I have a funny Ansel Adams story if you want to hear it.
Yeah, feel free.
Do you know John Sexton?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, John Sexton, one of Ansel Adams' assistants, an amazing black and white photographer. He has beautiful books out there on trees. He actually talks to the trees, and he says this in his lectures where I was at to get in contact with the trees. But he has this great Ansel Adams story. I think it's great. So I'm teaching this workshop with him, and he's sharing all these Ansel Adams stories. So here's one of the stories. So back in the 70s, when Ansel Adams was getting famous, before there were computers, someone on the East Coast writes Ansel Adams a letter on the West Coast. And he's unhappy with Ansel Adams. So this is what John Sexton is saying. Now, listeners can't see your expression there, but your expression said, how could anyone be unhappy with Ansel Adams, right?
Right.
So this is what the letter says. Dear Mr. Adams, I have your books, and I'm sure you've read his books, the negative and the print, right?
Yeah.
And they're still valid today, even though they have nothing to do with digital. So he says, Dear Mr. Adams, I have your books. I have your posters. You inspired me. You inspired me to go to Yosemite. And when I got there, it didn't look like that. So it's a funny story, but it doesn't look like that, right? Ansel Adams was an artist, the first HDR photographer. What he got out of like Moonrise over Hernandez and Half Dome, all those, they're like HDR images. The tonal range, the values are just incredible. So anyway, I think it's a funny story. And when people say, actually, when HDR came out, when people said, oh, I hate HDR, I said, well, Ansel Adams was the first HDR photographer. You hate him, right? So it's really to each his own, But bringing back to, it doesn't look like that. I think it's important in our photography to say if a picture has been digitally enhanced a lot.
Yeah.
Well, in other words, if you can put birds in the picture or change the color of the leaves to make it look like fall, whatever, I think it's important to be honest.
Well, how old were you when you first started photographing?
Well, my father, we used to develop pictures in our basement in the 1950s on Long Island. My father had a Bessler enlarger and a Linhof view camera, and a speed graphic view, and a Canon camera, a 35 millimeter camera, which I still have here. So we developed in the basement. So I've been taking pictures since before I was 10.
Yeah. See, like, me and you have something in common in that a lot of the photographs that we create have been primarily to like serve the magazine articles that we write, the books that we write, so on and so forth. So there's a functional quality to some of the images that we make. But there's stuff that we create that is really very personal. And I'll speak for myself, is that I'm always trying to challenge myself to make a photograph that I would have made the year before. You know, I always want to sort of push myself and sort of explore new territory as a photographer. So for you, what has that been about recently? How have you been challenging yourself, or what have you been aspiring to in your photography over the last couple of years?
Well, first of all, I think that's great that you do that. And I think it's a great goal for photographers to try to challenge themselves and try to push themselves. And because that's how we get better, right? Mm-hmm. You know, Eric Clapton and Santana, I'm sure they're pushing themselves to try to write a different song, sound a little different so they stay current, right? The downside of that is I was on a trip recently with a guy, and he had just won some awards. And he was so focused on getting a better picture. He was so focused, really focused on getting a picture and beating himself. It ruined it for him, and actually ruined it for a lot of the other people on the trip. So I think it's good to challenge yourself, but don't put so much pressure on yourself that, you're going to, just ruin the experience. So anyway, I'm really glad you do, and I do that. But I think what I would like to get better at is processing. Someone came up to me recently and said at a talk, she said, I'm bored with my landscape pictures. Well, I said, did you ever do black and white? She said, no. I said, that could awaken the artist within you. I said, if you use Lightroom, great. You use On1 software or Nik or whatever. Play with just the different filters, the red, the green, the blue, the orange, the yellow, and see how those different filters can change the mood of the scene. Play around in contrast, because in black and white, as you know, contrast is king. So I said, play around, and that could change everything. Like you could play acoustic guitar and be bored playing acoustic guitar. Get an electric guitar and get like a little synthesizer for $99 that makes every sound in the world, and you might like playing guitar again.
Yeah. So, speaking of black and white, what's your preferred method for converting color image to black and white right now?
Yeah, I still like the Nik stuff. How about you?
Yeah, I just purchased the DxO versions this past week because I wanted to support their purchase of the Nik software, and I'm hoping that they stick around and improve it.
Yes, improve, I think, and some new stuff, right?
Yeah. So it's just like, and it's inexpensive. I mean, Google gave it for free for a while, but they really didn't do much with any of it. So I've always enjoyed that. I mean, I've used Lightroom for a long time in order to make conversions, but man, the level of control that the Nik software provides is unmatched with anything else that I've ever tried.
Oh, I agree with you. Well, they have all those plugins. They have all the presets on the left of Nik Silver FX Pro.
And those control points.
And the control points, right. That's amazing. So you pick a preset that you like fine art or full structure, and then you do a control point on the main subject. You can make that subject, you can make a print not really look 3D, but you can make the subject really stand out. Mm-hmm.
So what's your next trip? Do you have one planned?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go to New York City and find a voice coach so I can sound as cool as you. No, you definitely. Not only are you a great interviewer, a great guy, a great photographer. I love your black and white photographs, a great workshop leader, but you definitely have the best. I wish I could. Maybe I just need to slow down and talk like a little bit lower, but it wouldn't be me. So you are really. So the next trip, actually, we're working on a book. This was such a success. We're doing a book on the Oregon coast. So we're going out to the... have you been there?
No, I've not been up to the Oregon coast. I've been up to Seattle area, but not Portland.
Oh, well, you go... If you want to start in Newport...
Okay.
Newport. You go Newport to Florence to Bandon. You could do this in about a week, and you plan your trip at low tide. So when you go to the seaside areas, the sea stars and the sea anemones are standing out. You can't get dense fog, but you could also get beautiful, beautiful sunsets because it's on the West Coast.
I look forward to seeing those pictures.
Yeah, thanks.
So, Rick, my last question that I ask each guest is I ask them to recommend another photographer for our listeners to discover and explore, and it can be anyone, someone you've long admired or someone you've recently discovered. So who would that one photographer be and why?
In addition to you?
Yeah.
Because I had you on my podcast recently, and your black and white pictures are definitely an inspiration. We talked about light and shadows there. A photographer I would recommend, a fellow named, and I'll send you a link, Andy Beals comes to mind.
Okay, I'm not familiar with him.
He lives in London and in China. And you've seen those pictures, like Art Wolfe has pictures of those cormorant fishermen,
yeah.
On the Lee River with those mountains in the back, like from Avatar.
Right.
He's an amazing young photographer who guided our trip there last year, and just an amazing, dedicated, helpful person, Andy Beals.
Fantastic.
I'll send you a link to his work.
And you just mentioned your new podcast, so why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm doing that. Actually, it was Larry Becker's idea. My friend Larry Becker, he worked at Kelby One for a while. And he said, why don't we do a podcast? Because I had done one before. And I love interviewing people like you do. I don't have the good voice, though. So we started it, and we started it in February, and we're going strong. And we were happy to have people like you and Scott Kelby and Art Wolfe and many other luminaries in the world on the show.
Oh, cool! I'll have links for the show in the show notes so everyone can check it out. But Rick,
cool. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with me again. It was a real pleasure. It always enjoys talking with you, Rick.
Well, it's a lot of fun. And again, thanks for editing my work and making me look good when you were at a PC Photo and Outdoor Photographer.
Thanks to Rick for spending time with us. To find out more about Rick and his work, visit ricksammon.com. And if you pre-order his book on Amazon, please use our affiliate link, as we receive a little bit of that to help support the show. And you can show your support of The Candid Frame by writing a review in the iTunes Store. As people search for podcasts to listen to, these reviews lead people to listen to us for the very first time, and that makes all the difference. So if you haven't already, please take the time to do that today. You can also support the show by making a monthly contribution through Patreon. And for as little as $2 a month, you can help us to not only meet the cost of production, but allow us to improve our podcast, YouTube channel, and website. Or if you just want to make a one-time contribution, you can do so via PayPal. You'll find links for both on the Candid Frame website or the show notes. To access our complete archive of interviews, download the free Candid Frame app, available for both Apple iOS and Android. Not only will you immediately receive the latest episode on your phone or tablet, but you can now easily share your favorite episodes on your social networks and help spread the word. And if you want to drop me a line with comments or suggestions for the show, you can email me directly from the app. Download it today by clicking on the link in the show notes or the website at thecandidframe.com. The Candid Frame's audio engineer is Martin Taylor, who you can find at theothermartintaylor.com. The show's senior producer is Cynthia Parker, and our music is from Kevin MacLeod, whose royalty-free music can be found at incompetech.com. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at simply @EbadianX. And this is Ebadian X, and this is The Candid Frame.